and welcome back to the AI Marketers Playbook, where we cover actionable frameworks to help you leverage AI in your business. I'm Audrey Chia, your host, and today I have with me Ashley Gross joining us today. Ashley is the founder and CEO of the AI Workforce Alliance, where she delivers AI solutions that actually solve business challenges. Now, before tools like ChatGPT, Ashley was already implementing AI strategies in large organizations. And amazingly, within 3 months of just rolling out her AI solutions, the organization she was working with managed to surpass their annual sales pipeline goal of 90 million, reaching a whopping 115 million in revenue. And we are so excited to have you with us, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's amazing to hear about your journey and how far you have come. But for listeners who don't know you, tell us more about your background and how did you get into the world of AI?
Sure. Yes, I have no business being in this field. I really don't. I've been a marketer for 10 years. Ever since I was 18, I started working for enterprises. And from there, I really worked in primarily demand generation. And so I'm very familiar with a marketer's perspective, their workflows, the friction points they run into. Nothing out of the box or new there. But in 2020, that's when I started dabbling in the world of generative AI. And I always like to tell this story because one, it makes me relatable, but two, it shows like there was a real intention. That was the year I found out I was going to be a mom. And as a marketer, we have a million things that we're responsible for. And I knew that I needed to consolidate my work week from 40 hours to 15, but keep the same exact output and quality that I was able to deliver with the 40-hour work week. That was really why I started using Jasper AI back in 2020. After I was able to consolidate that work week, I was like, okay, this is cool. Now I have time to actually think about where do I want my career to go in the next 3 to 5 years. And from there, I kind of just did this little intentional audit of how I was spending my time. And back then, my career was, I want to be a CMO. But all of the things I was doing on an everyday basis were a lot of busy work. I wasn't getting in front of C-suite. I wasn't participating in board meetings or preparing pitches and slide decks. So I wasn't getting the experiences I needed to get to where I wanted to be in my career. And so then I took this lens of, I'm going to start taking all of the tasks I don't find joy in and automating them with AI tools, right? And so my learning experience evolved from implementing generative AI tools into my marketing tech stack to using automations to tie them together and then getting into the agentic workflows. But on the back end, really, I was just experimenting, right? And I was telling everybody at my enterprise that I worked for what I was doing, which got me in front of the CMO. And by the way, that is not an easy thing to do. I was incessantly talking about what I was doing with AI to everybody and anyone that would listen. And so she came to me and she was like, hey, you're talking a lot about what you're doing with AI. Do you want to roll it out to our marketing org? And this was pre-ChatGPT. And I said, yes. And I took that same exact human first approach of what out of this marketing organization, what are the tasks that we have to do every day that you don't like doing? Let's automate those so that no one feels like they're being replaced with AI. They're just being augmented with AI. But more importantly, they're spending their time doing whatever they want to be doing. And we're not taking the joyful tasks away from them. And then we tied that to revenue because 3 months into implementing use cases, we overachieved our pipeline of converted pipeline, mind you, by 25 million. So it was
Wow.
I was like, this is wild. I love marketing. I love marketers. But to be able to actually align a workforce and use technology to solve problems and on the back end, be able to have a newborn and a career and not have to feel like I need to make the sacrifice. I was like, this is it. This is all I'm doing.
Wow, that is an incredible story, and I think you shared so many golden takeaways even in the first few minutes of our conversation. I love how you said about figuring something out for yourself first, and then because of the need to streamline your processes so that you can have a better work-life balance, which is what, again, AI is great for. And I also love what you say about AI augmenting our workflows instead of replacing marketers. I think that is a concern that a lot of marketers still have. And I'm going to ask you a hard question now. A lot of my copywriter friends have realized that AI has gotten so good that it's replacing or it's able to replace junior and mid-level copywriters or even marketers. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love this question because I do feel like we have to have these vulnerable conversations to move the needle on a large scale and get more buy-in and adoption with AI. There's no scenario where we don't have these tough conversations, and we can do this, because it is a scary time, and it is challenging our core beliefs on, if we tied our expertise and how we feel about ourselves to our career, and our career is copywriting, that's pretty traumatizing to see that, robots are creating copy. I'm not an expert. I add that as a disclaimer, because my answer would be, I'm personally not using AI to write for me. I am using it to reformat my thoughts in a way that fits whatever audience I'm trying to target. And so I don't feel that it is a threat, because that's not what I'm using it for. And I think that this goes back to the intention behind it. There's a ton of people using AI for copywriting. Some might be good. Some of them you can absolutely tell, and it does lose that trust and transparency. And I think that yes, the concern should be there. It's warranted, but I would more so think about it as, well, let's reframe this, right? Like, to a certain degree, a lot of people can be good at writing. What is your special skill that you bring to copywriting? Is it ideation? Is it brainstorming? Is it being relatable to audiences and being able to pivot depending on what those are? You have a super set of skills that this robot doesn't have. Dig deep and figure out what that was and is, and double down on that. Because you don't need to be using AI the same way other people are using it. That doesn't mean it's the best use case for it.
Definitely. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that they can bring a lot of human value to the table, and they can continue to do so while using AI as a companion or a co-pilot, and that actually speeds up the process so that it frees up your mind to do higher level strategic stuff, like what you said in the beginning, right? And when it comes to, for example, AI at an organizational level, so let's talk about what you're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
How are you helping businesses transform using, the latest tools, or like building out workflows for them?
Yeah, so I have a framework that always works for me, and I like it because it starts with the problem, which in my opinion is where you always need to start. So I essentially will go into the mid-market enterprise clients of mine, and I will say, okay, if I had to ask you to identify what is the biggest business problem that your business has this quarter, and let's just say out of 3 problems I give them, those problems are lack of clean and enriched data without relying on third-party vendors, lack of insight into their customer's journey, and slow sales cycles, right? I give them those 3 problems, and I ask everybody in the C-suite, board of director, founder level to answer that question. 2 things happen. 1, I'm aligning them, because I've never been in a discovery call where everyone's aligned on the same problem. So it's like, regardless if you take AI out of it, nothing is going to get accomplished if everyone is trying to prioritize a different problem. So I align them immediately at the top. But then the second thing I'm doing is getting them to think about, okay, we're always given a long list of priorities, and we're expected to kind of pivot those priorities on a week by week basis without communicating what we're doing and how far we've accomplished something. So I'm kind of getting them to understand that the way they've been communicating and the processes that they've put in place, where they're starting to see silos and fragmented pieces, is a lack of communicating. So I'm already trying to kind of get them to unlearn how they've gotten to these strategist roles, because the further up you work and the more closely you become, a C-suite or a director, you get into more of a strategist and less of a practitioner.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but you just have to understand that you are not the best to be experimenting, right? Because your role is not programmed for you to experiment. It's programmed for you to lead. And so I'm getting them to realize that, 1, it's okay to communicate and get on the same level as your founders and boards and say, are we still working on this problem? It's okay. You can ask questions and you clarify. And then from there, I'm kind of getting them to think about this as, they don't have all the answers. And they really don't have to have all the answers. They just kind of got it into their head that they have to. The good news is their team does. They just need to talk to their team more. So after they align at the top, I have them say, okay, out of those 3 problems, you picked 1. Let's go back around the circle and talk about, in your past lives, how have you solved lack of insights into the customer journey, for example? They all have solved this to a certain degree. They know the metrics, the timeline, the resources that they need. Those are those use cases. Those are the proof of concept use cases that we're going to use AI for, because they already know the metrics that they need, the timeline, the resources. And then from there, they just go back to their teams and they say, we need to solve this problem. Here are the ways we can solve these problems. Out of these ways that we have to solve this problem, what are you all not excited about, right? Pick one of these or 2 of these that you're not excited about, they don't bring you joy. Now let's assign AI to that, right? Because now we're actually choosing a proof of concept use case that people are not excited about doing. So they're going to be more excited to try to implement AI to solve this. It's still tying into the impact of the overall business. And most importantly, it's forcing everybody from the top down and bottom up to audit their tech stack and figure out, like, is this actually working? Do we like this? Are we married to this? Yes? Great. Let's start adding in those AI pieces of glue to tie it all together. If no, let's evaluate that now, because I feel like really aligning everyone pre-AI is the only way, in my opinion, to see success. And it's the only way I've gotten all 11 of my clients to have mass adoption quickly and be able to scale past those pilot projects.
I think what you said about alignment is spot on. What you normally see in organizations is either at the ground level, people are excited about AI and management is like, or management is excited and everyone on the ground level is like, there's a bit of a dissonance, right? So
Yes.
if you're able to get, for example, your stakeholders to come together, and I think the interesting thing about what you mentioned was focusing on what they were least excited about, because then the use case for AI is so much stronger, and it almost then helps people to be like, okay, I'm willing to try something because it's going to take away stuff that I don't like to do, not take away stuff that I like to do. And that could also help in that mindset shift, right?
Exactly. And there's a lot of asynchronous work that goes on behind the scenes, but it's more so like I lead with that communication and alignment. And then in the background, I'm working with the data science teams and the IT and the regulatory teams and saying, you know, it's not that scary. I understand that this is new and that is like very fear inducing. But it's the same data play, right? Like it's the same thing that's been at stake with your regular tech stack. So let's take the governance and frameworks you applied to your regular tech stack, where data was still always what you were trying to protect and safeguard, and let's just duplicate that for AI. And then let's evaluate where the fear is, right? Like instead of trying to create a whole new governance structure, a whole new task force, right? Like you already have these principles and you have this experience. You just don't think that you do because you haven't applied it to AI yet. And that's really where I get executive leadership bought in, because they just tend to have more of like a fear paralysis approach where since they haven't done it, they're like, we need to do a ton of research. And then they stifle their own innovation. Whereas like they've dealt with this before, right? Like we've always had to safeguard our data. It's just a new tool and a new way of safeguarding it.
And interestingly, from what you have shared, right, I actually see that you are bringing a very valuable skill set to the table, and that is like communication with stakeholders, even without the use of AI, or like even with any new change, right, there needs to be that comms involved. Curious to know, so in your previous roles, were you already, coaching and training teams? Was it already part of your own workflows, or was it a new skill set that you picked up along the way?
These are all new skills I picked up. It's funny because your career path to marketing, in my experience, working specifically in enterprises is anywhere from like 10 to 15, upwards of 20 years before you ever make it to CMO level, because a lot of the times I think it gets really difficult as you work your way up from, being an entry level to a junior, then being a people manager and having a team. You accumulate the busy work, right? Like you're more responsible for putting out fires, and those can hinder you cross-collaborating and being confident and comfortable speaking with people that, are in different departments with bigger titles than you. So a lot of this was, very much coming from my perspective of, I don't want to wait 20 years to start having those conversations. And it's been really enlightening for me, I think, because there's nothing wrong with being a CMO. I love CMOs dearly. I work with them on a day-to-day basis. But now that I had the experiences that I needed, I no longer want to be, a CMO. I would much rather have my own company and have fractional, employees come work for me and help companies for 6 to 12 months and then go on to help others. Like that's what I care more about than being at one company and having a title. But I would have never been able to figure that out had I kept going the way that I was going and trying to pull those experiences in on top of everything else. So I'm very much trying to like lead by what I say and gain the experiences selfishly that I've wanted the whole time.
Amazing. And I think it's a beautiful timing where AI came along at the right window where you have had the opportunity to explore. I think even for myself and other entrepreneurs, AI has unlocked new business models for us, new business ideas, and helped us to really, get that productivity in, right? Because it's saving us so much time. I would love to know for yourself, right? What are some of your use cases, whether it's your own, business workflows or for your clients, how are you helping them to save time and really increase efficiency at work?
So many different ways. I would say me personally, I have to create so much content because I have every channel, right? So YouTube, I think I have like 4 LinkedIn pages, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, like you get my point. It's a lot. Plus a newsletter, plus those weekly YouTube videos of like the behind the scenes. And it's a lot. And I think for me, I have been able to maintain that trust and transparency and community by not having myself cloned into an avatar to do all of these things. I've just been able to focus on using AI to take like one long-term YouTube video and break it down into like the best optimized channels and lengths for TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. Being able to put one Canva template in to my GPT and have it create 50 different variations of it, right? So for me, that was really probably the biggest call out because I was spending every Sunday, I was spending 12 to 15 hours on that one day creating content for the whole week, like 1 week. That's insane. And now I'm spending 2.5 hours for a whole entire week. So that was my biggest exciting use case personally because it freed up my time. For clients, it's so many things. I would say it's something as simple as optimizing how they're spending their meetings. So having, the capabilities as they're in their meetings, especially like my C-suite folks that have, 40 plus people that they're managing, being able to implement some generative AI solutions that help them utilize those meetings so that, say we're in a meeting right now and I'm like, okay, Audrey, I'm going to assign you an Asana board and add this and the due date, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just giving this to you in our meeting. I don't have to actually leave the meeting, be distracted, open up a Slack. And it's automatically creating an Asana board on the back end because I told it to in this call. It's creating the deadlines, it's creating the due dates, it's sending the email follow-ups. So like everything from just being able to optimize what they have to do on a daily basis to feel better and have more of a strategy long-term to, I would say, the biggest one being, implementing AI into chatbots that live on Confluence pages to make regulatory and IT and GTS approvals a lot faster and easier. It's everything and anything in between, right? I don't ever think that it's the same thing across different companies. I have the same framework, but it's different problems. It's different tech stacks. And at the end of the day, it's really just tying everything together in a way that is good for the business as a whole. So not just like adding tech for the sake of adding tech.
Yeah, amazing that you said that, right? Because a lot of people use AI or try to use AI for the sake of it, and they're like, let's just try 100 tools and see which one sticks. But that is maybe not the most effective way to really fully leverage the power of AI.
Yeah.
Having said that, right, I think one thing you also mentioned that was interesting to me was you now have this way of going into a company and looking at where are their problem areas and solving it not just in the marketing department but beyond, right? Having been a marketer yourself, how did you pick up all these new skills that you now have to help companies integrate AI in their business? It must be a lot of new knowledge that you have to have acquired.
It is, but it's refreshing because I've always been a demand generation manager. And so I think that I've learned so much more from May to November even of this year than I have in the rest of my 10 years of being a marketer because I didn't have bias, right? Like when you work for a company, especially when you've been in like, demand generation, if you've been in a specific department for most of those 10 years, you tend to not question the way you think about marketing because you've been trained a certain way, your experience is a certain way. And marketing is very much like a lot of people do the same things. And so if you want to be different, you have to do something different. And so the second that you take yourself out of that internal bias of like, I'm going to do it this way because I was trained this way, you see things from a different perspective. And so I think how I've been able to pick up on these different skills is before I ever get on a discovery call with a client, like the moment that they form fill that discovery call, I go onto their website, I actually take the role of their prospect, and whether it's a financial company, right, and they have a marketplace and I'm trying to buy something from them, I experience that as one of their prospects so that I can see, oh, you get on their website and it's super buggy, or there's so much information, I'm overwhelmed. Whatever it may be, I put myself in that position and that lens, and then I just start quite literally writing things down on my legal pad, my yellow legal pad. I'm like, user experience, took me this long to get somebody on the phone, has to book a demo before I can see the ROI of a tool. I just start writing down all these things that I find frustrating, and then I look at, okay, from a marketing lens, here's how you solve them. That's really it. I think we just always think we have the greatest products and services, and we don't like to question them. And so I just question everything, and I always assume it can be better. And that's the mentality that I think allows me to be a sponge and absorb so much knowledge.
Definitely. I think even as a copywriter myself, when I work on client projects or develop strategic positioning or value proposition, it's always from the role of the prospect of the client, buying, purchasing something, right? And a lot of times, I think many business owners or founders have the bias that they have built a beautiful platform, which they have. But because of this view, they sometimes don't see, or they put blinders on certain parts of their processes, which is why having an external consultant or someone with that, a different point of view could help in that process.
Yes.
How do you navigate, tough conversations with your clients? Because I'm sure that you really have to drill down into a lot of gaps that they could potentially have in their current flows.
Yes, I think, well, first, I'm good with boundaries. I'm a mom, so I'm a natural at kind of saying nope, we're not going to do this, and explaining it in a way that doesn't frustrate people. So I think that those skills translate really well into emotional intelligence in business. So I would say, right from the beginning, I'm very respectful and intentional of my own time. So, and I say this because it does add up to the bigger picture and the bigger conversation. So if you want to book a discovery call, it's paywalled, right? You're going to respect my time. I'm going to respect yours. We're both going to be on time and prepared. I set that intention right away so that whoever wants to work with me knows she means business. Yeah. If we are going to be asking her questions, we need to come with here's our problems, here's what we need to accomplish. We're not just going to sit here because we're paying $250 upwards. Yeah. And so I already get them to kind of think about are you ready? Because maybe you're not, and that's okay. But if you're not ready, let's not have this conversation yet. Let's go back to the drawing board and perhaps, revisit this later. So that's how I start, my relationships off with my clients. And then I would say when it does come time, I always am very intentional again with how I tell them how this is going to work. So on those calls, right, I'm doing what I just told you I'm doing. I'm getting them to identify a problem, align on that problem, communicate solutions to that problem, and then saying, we're going to create a roadmap, because this is not all going to happen at once. This is going to be a crawl, walk, run method. Here's what that implementation roadmap looks like for you. And here are the problems that we're going to identify and diagnose along the way. So I'm telling them, here's the issues, but I'm giving them a timeline of, listen, I know you don't want to talk about this. We're going to talk about it in 3 months from now, before they actually see that proposal, so that they're understanding their product's not perfect. Nobody's is. They know what we're going to talk about, so it's not a surprise if I say, hey, this website has 10 broken backlinks and it's not, converting. There's no surprise. It's intentional, but I'm also giving them a timeline to say, if you want to go work on that before we evaluate it, you got 3 months. But just know that this is actually making you lose X, Y, Z. And I always take my feelings out of it and prove ROI. So if I'm going to have a conversation that is particularly tough around their user experience on their website, right? Most of the time, they end up telling me, well, our competitor XYZ has this, and that's why we have that. And I always have to rephrase this as, but your prospects don't care who your competitors are. They're going onto your website. You're giving them 30 seconds, right? They have 30 seconds to find what they want on your website. And if they can't find it, they're leaving. So it doesn't matter if your competitors have this and they're converting. You are not them. So let's figure out what works well for you. That's kind of my redirection, if you will. Yeah. And I always pull in the revenue. I never make it about feelings and personal emotions. I always say, here is the revenue you're losing as a result. Because nobody argues, right? Because if the business isn't making money, no one has a job at the end of the day. So I pull it out to the big picture.
Yeah, you kind of argue and you bring the numbers in.
Yes.
And when you propose solutions, right, AI solutions, do you tie it to certain KPIs that they're going to achieve, or certain ROI they're going to get from implementing a strategy like that?
Yeah, I always try to work with the OKRs or KPIs that they have assigned. Personally, I hate attribution. I think it's been broken for a very long time, and I think that fixating on everything and trying to measure everything makes you lose sight of how the business overall is doing and the health of the business. And that's when the silos start, because everyone's just less focused on how the business is doing and how their teams are doing. And this is where, you see these issues bubble up to the top and lead to more friction points on a larger level. Yeah. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's really just, listen, how's the business's overall health? How can we help your department fix that? let's apply these. And I always like to show them. So during these discovery calls, I'm always screen sharing my own workflow and telling them my own conversion rates. I never ever implement an AI tool that I haven't personally vetted myself or I haven't used myself, because then that loses that trust and that authority. So I always show them what I'm doing and how it's working on the front end from a user experience and then on the back end.
Awesome. So speaking of which, right, I know you also have your own AI funnel workflow that you show your clients.
Yes.
We would love to have a behind the scenes peek into what that looks like for you.
Okay. So a little context before I screen share. So the number one thing that I love to show my clients and prospects in general is what a user experience looks like from the moment that they land on your website. Because everyone gets so, I would say, distracted with trying to put out good content, but they don't own the data, right? Like if you put a LinkedIn post out, you can measure the likes, you can measure the titles that are interacting with it, but you don't own that data. You can't send them emails. You can't put anything in front of them. So I try to get people to rethink how they are owning their prospects' data and actually able to segment it further to just like personalize the journey even more. And so how I do this is I start off with my own website. I'm an AI consultant. It's a very saturated time, as you know, in this field. And lots of AI consultants, products, services feel like they're AI. It shouldn't feel like it's AI. You should be using these tools in the background to make the most relatable experience for your prospects without screaming, "We are AI," right? You go on my website, here's the contact page. None of this screams AI, no pop-ups, no cookies, being weird and distracting.
Popping at you right there.
None at all.
The DALL-E images.
Yes.
Those are still a bit questionable, in my opinion.
Yes. None of that is happening. But if you click on chat now, this is when intercom pops up. And like, this is when you start to have like those chat feelings. And you'll also notice like, you don't actually, when you're on my website, let's just say you quite literally went to the homepage and you scrolled. Usually you can't gate that, right? You have no way of figuring out who those people are. You might get lucky and be able to see the companies. So what I do for myself and some of my clients is if they are targeting US-based companies, I like to use RB2B. And so again, you're on my website, you don't click on anything. On the back end, I'm using RB2B, and I have set the parameters for my ICP. Basically just, here are the types of companies and folks I want to attract. I have my annual recurring revenue, company size, seniority of job titles, department, category, states. And then I have a must match 4 of these filters in order to actually measure it, because I'm paying per lead for this tool. So every single time somebody goes onto my website, I'm able to actually see who they are, have their email, their LinkedIn profile, contact information, which then triggers an automation to Clay. Why I love Clay, and this is an empty table because I don't want to show you proprietary information, but why I love Clay is they're already coming to this Clay table with their full name, email, company domain, LinkedIn profile. So without me having to lift a finger, what I'm doing is I'm creating an enrichment and I'm doing a waterfall effect so that it can extract anything that I want. And specifically when I say this, you can set up, let's just say, so for my current company, right, I need to know what tech stack they're on because I only work with clients if they're on HubSpot, Salesforce, or Marketo. So then I can actually use the tools I would usually use, so Capterra being one of them, or Clearbit, right, and look for this information. So on top of having all the information already, I can choose what more information I need using the tools I've already been using. HG Insights, Zoom Info, 6sense. They're all within this one tool of Clay. But instead of having separate licenses and having multiple documents and tabs open and copying and pasting, I'm doing it all from this one tool. So then by the time it's already enriched with all the information I need, it's going back to my HubSpot CRM. So that when it's in my CRM, all the fields are already matched. I know all of the information I need about my clients. And then my AI agent actually places them in the email nurture that goes with those enrichments. From a user experience, you just go to my site. 1 minute later, you get a connection request from me on LinkedIn. 24 hours later, you're getting an email. That's it. That's your user experience.
Wow.
So I think it's interesting too, because using those tools separately, it was giving me about an 80% conversion. Yeah. All together using an automation and then an AI agent manually checking those, it's a 99% conversion. And again, no avatars, no voice clones. I'm not sending them slimy outreach sequences and LinkedIn DMs. It's just Ashley's everywhere. And I hear that a lot. They're like, you are all over my LinkedIn and I don't know why. It's very intentional. It's like that because I chose to do it that way because that's marketing. You know, marketers' jobs are to get the information in front of the right audience so that when they're ready to buy, you are you're at the top of their mind.
Wow, amazing. I think the interesting thing that stood out to me was your client journey wasn't AI like, but everything else back end was AI, which then helps you to create this, beautiful kind of interaction with your client where it's just seamless, right? And they don't even feel like they're talking to a bot, which I think is one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of AI companies are making, is that it looks very much AI and there isn't that human touch or that sense of trust.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's the thing too, is I feel like people aren't having those conversations, and I get it. You know, security is not the sexiest talk, but at the end of the day, the differentiator really is going to be the trust and the transparency. Sales is human to human. It is never going to be robot to robot. You have to maintain that authority in a trusting way and not ever make your prospects question whether or not they can trust you with their data, right? The moment that they feel like you're trying to replace yourself with a robot, you lose their trust. So use AI on the back end to make them, to give away the free resources, to get a better idea of who they are and how you can help them, but never jeopardize that trust. And I feel like, yeah, you nailed it. Like this is going to be 2025, right? This is very much going to be the conversation that we're having.
To see what's going to happen in 2025, given all that has already happened in the past 2 years. And for yourself, what are you most excited about, in the coming year?
Multi-agent systems, 100%. I'm so excited about them. So right now I'm using a multi-agent system. So what that means is I built multiple agents that are talking to each other and running together without me really having to do anything. Now, how I maintain human in the loop is every Friday, my AI agents will send me an email, right? They all have names. They'll send me an email and they'll say, here's all your automations. Here's all of your AI tools. Here are the issues that came up. Here's a weekly report of all the incidences. Here's some things you might want to mitigate for risk. And then every Friday, I'm spending 2 to 2.5 hours going back and iterating those. But if I were to do all of that on my own, that would take me a week's worth of work alone just to try and find and debug all of these tools. So I'm really excited about multi-agent systems. I think that I get more and more excited the more conversations I have with people, because we have to have the vulnerable conversations, make people feel safe, rephrase it instead of, you're going to get left behind, to you're not going to get left behind. The business that you work for probably will, if you're not using these tools, in order to get to these conversations. And that's what I'm excited about, is because I think a lot more people now are starting to feel a little bit more confident about using these tools so that we can kind of like elevate this conversation to be more, because it's moving so fast. And I get so worried because I want everyone to understand what is fully capable, but we have to do the hard work and have these hard conversations first.
Definitely. I think actually from what I've noticed, businesses over the past year have evolved slightly. 1 year ago, a lot of businesses were still on the fence about AI, and they were thinking, it could be a fad, or they're just waiting for someone else to adopt that technology, right? But 1 year later, they're realizing they have to start doing something. I think now is actually the perfect time where you're seeing a lot more businesses flip that switch and decide to really commit and invest their resource, their team members in upskilling. And that took a bit of time, but I think it's because people suddenly realize that AI is not going anywhere and there is so much potential to be unlocked with the use of AI. Ashley, I would also like to know, maybe one other thing, right? Beyond AI, you mentioned that you're also a mom, right? How do you manage both, motherhood and running your own business and your agents at the same time? That must be quite a lot of work for one woman.
It's work, but honestly, I don't really think that there's anything I don't think balance is a real thing. I kind of think it's a myth, right? Because there's no perfect scenario where you are working, X amount of hours every day, and then you get to be like this magical, exciting mom and feel great about it, right? Like every day I just strive to find a way to kind of bridge those two worlds together. But I also think that's what makes my work really meaningful, because I was put in a position, in 2020 where I was being asked to choose between being a mom and having a career, and I wasn't willing to make those sacrifices, right? So I figured out how to do the work in less time so that I could have both. And so I think just having a really important why and knowing that every day the work that I'm doing is, providing for my family, but also making it possible to be present. That's what I kind of count as balance. You know, am I being present and intentional with my time every day? Do I feel good about, when I go to bed at night? Do I feel good about how my day was spent? That to me is like the balance. And I think I just do it all by constantly being aware of how I spend my time, whether or not I'm happy with the time being spent, and being quick to change, right? Like as marketers, I think we have to experiment all the time. But like turn that experimenting inwards, because as you grow and mature, your ideas change and your values change. So like make sure that your work life is bringing you joy, because work and personal life, there's no balance. Work is personal. Personal life is work, right? Like it's the same thing. It's just different jobs.
Absolutely, and especially for people who are trying to build their own business, right? You will find that it's a very gray area, but that's also the beauty of it. So for example, for moms who are, or people who are considering, motherhood, right, and who are in that same position as you were, some time back, what would you advise them?
Oh my gosh. I would say when it comes to the job that you're doing every day at your desk, start to audit your time. So Toggle, TOGGL, that's a free extension. All you have to do is click start and stop. You can actually tag the tasks. So even if you start to like intentionally try to figure out where you're spending your time, because a lot of people don't have, a good wrap on that, start there. And then once you have a high level overview of where that time is being spent, start to make the changes that allow you to have more time to do what you want to do and be present as a mom. I would also say, as a personal note, having, I wish somebody would have told me to like start having more conversations with myself on like what motherhood looks like to me. I find that motherhood means different things to different people. And there's almost like this silent standard for what that means and needs to be applied to everyone and everything in the same way. And it definitely doesn't. It adds more pressure. So I very much take this mentality of unsubscribe, right? Like I'm never going to have the Pinterest house and the Pinterest life, right? Like today is Thanksgiving. We're not even doing turkey. We're doing chicken.
Good choice.
So thank you. Nobody even likes turkey in this house. I'm like, why would we do this? But just, start to like make decisions that feel right for you and start having conversations with your partner that are good for your family and your unit. Doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. My husband is an amazing stay-at-home dad. He is the chef. He is, he's cleaning. He's homeschooling our son. And I think that for a lot of homes, that's not an option, but like we made sacrifices to make that possible because that was what was good for us. That was our personal choice. So I just think dig deep, think about what you want and what you want your structure to be like, and then forget about the rest of it,
I absolutely love that. So I think for anyone who is, in this journey and like figuring things out, I think digging deep and finding your why, as well as what motivates you and your value system, and of course communicating it with your partner or with your family, I think those are absolutely essential on this journey. So maybe to wrap things up, Ashley, what are some of your favorite tools, and what is your final tip for someone who is trying to leverage AI for the first time?
My favorite tools, so I would say Relevance AI, being a multi-agent system, cannot say enough wonderful things about them. That would probably be like my number one favorite tool at the moment, because I've been doing so much work into consolidating all these generative AI tools into like one agent instead of having multiple licenses to multiple tools. A couple other tools I think internally for communications, Read AI for sure, because it's marketed as a note taker, but honestly, I'm using it way more for communication to better myself, to stop saying the filler words. I love saying like and and it's horrible. I'm trying to get better at it. But again, the intentionality, you only have so many hours in a day. So like my note taker also helps me be better at communicating. Tools that are versatile for that, I love. And then my final tip for anyone using AI, I would say start with the problem. Vet the vendors that built the tools to solve your problem, right? ChatGPT is a generalist tool. I know that we love that tool. I use it every day. It doesn't solve every single problem. Find the tools that do solve the problems. Try to ensure that the tools you choose have multiple benefits and serve multiple departments, so that marketing's tech stack is not 30 plus tools and everyone else's are like 10. And then communicate and talk, because it's constant communication and cross collaboration and ideation from different perspectives that help you learn more fast. That's really it.
So start communicating with your
Yes.
stakeholders, with your team, with yourself
Yes.
even, and of course with AI, and then you can figure out how to bring it all together. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights, Ashley. If people want to find you, how can they reach out?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I try to respond to every single DM unless it's a cold pitch. I do not respond. But other than that, I am happy to meet everyone and answer questions and get to know all of you.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and hit the bell for more actionable marketing insights. We will see you next time. Take care.